What would become one of the defining moments of 573 Cavalry began on a quiet day in November 2006, far off in the desolate eastern desert of Diyala. Farming hamlets of simple mud brick hid a deadly secret that was about to be uncovered. In 1995, a wealthy Canadian named Abu Abdul Rahman married a woman from Turki village. Her brothers championed an extreme version of conservative Islam, Wahhabism. Together with Rahman's money and connections, the family established a cult determined to create a caliphate and plotted to assassinate Saddam's sons. As his extremism grew, Rahman became deeply connected with Al-Qaeda, helping to plot the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. Following the US invasion of Iraq, an eastern tribe known as the Al-Nida began to smuggle weapons from Iran. Rahman's cult in Turkey became linked with them, facilitating weapons and supplies to Zarqawi's Al-Qaeda in Iraq. In 2006, captured documents explained the Al-Qaeda strategy to surround Baghdad in urban belts. The cities within the belts would provide shelter and supplies to fighters moving into Baghdad. These urban centers would allow AQI to shelter from the intense coalition attacks. Turkey became a network of training camps and supply points, funneling weapons and fighters into Baghdad. Baqubah was an important city for AQI to reinforce due to its supply lines from Iran. The remote lands of Diyala provided places to train and equip insurgents, far from the centers of coalition troops. Following the death of Zarqawi in June of 2006, Rahman was under consideration to take over command of AQI. Zarqawi's final hideout was in Hibib, just west of Baqubah. Rahman is a bit of a mystery. He has been reportedly killed many times. The coalition forces reported that his body was found alongside Zarqawi in Hibib June 2006. However, Rahman was almost certainly at Turkey in November. His death has been reported elsewhere as late as 2014. Research into his true life turns up very little information, and only one picture of him is publicly available, if it even is actually Rahman. It seems that Abd Abdul Rahman al-Iraqi is something of a ghost. The remote Diyala hinterlands had seen little coalition presence since the invasion of Iraq, leaving the area open for the enemy to take root. Teams from 573rd Cavalry operating near the town of Bollard Ruse had been tracking patterns of insurgent attacks and conducting border interdiction missions to stem the flow of weapons and fighters moving in from the Iranian border. The pattern of attacks seemed as if the enemy were practicing, indicating that a training camp may have been nearby. Months earlier, a Special Forces team lost 2 soldiers in a running gun battle near the town of Canal, just south of Bollard Ruse. It was clear that something or someone very important was hiding out in the eastern deserts of Diyala. The first Battle of Turki Village, aka Operation Turki Bowl I, began during a routine aerial reconnaissance overflight. Headhunter 6, Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Poppers, Command Sergeant Major Ray Edgar, Major Brett Sylvia, and the troop commanders were on board for the overflight. A container buried in an irrigation canal, filled with weapons, documents, and bomb-making materials, was uncovered by the rotor wash of their UH-60 helicopter. A team consisting of 9 paratroopers led by HH-6 himself secured the site, while the helo returned to FOB Caldwell with Major Sylvia to organize the squadron for battle. As the commander waited, enemy scouts on motorcycles appeared to investigate the cache. Time was of the essence. The cache contained munitions, but also vehicles covered in weeds to conceal them from the air. Major Sylvia began planning the operation as soon as he arrived at FOB Caldwell, with Lieutenant Colonel Poppers still in the field at the cache site. Spinning up an organization as large as a cavalry squadron took time, but the enemy was already on alert. A race was on to mobilize faster than the insurgent militia. To gain a swift tactical advantage, troops were airlifted out to the cache site as the rest of squadron drew equipment. Operation Turki Bowl was a squadron-level movement to act against a well-trained guerrilla force, planned on the fly under hasty conditions while developing their own battlefield intelligence. This was the kind of fight the cavalry was built for. It would be the first real test of 573rd Cavalry as a fighting force. A team from Bravo Troop rapidly inserted to the cache site by helicopter. The remainder of Bravo and Charlie troops drove into Turkey to begin searching for hidden enemies. Alpha Troop ventured east, cutting off escape routes. 573 had a total manpower of about 330 troopers, less than half that of an infantry battalion. Recon squadrons were not intended for direct combat applications, although they could certainly fight if pressed. It would not be long before 573 realized that they had kicked the hornet's nest. 573 moved out from FOB Caldwell before dawn. Alpha Troop moved wide to the east across open desert to cover any escape routes toward Iran. The rugged off-road terrain made for slow progress. A cavalry reconnaissance squadron such as 573 consisted of 2 cavalry troops and 1 infantry company, along with a headquarters troop, mortars, and an attached support company, Delta. The cavalry troops, Alpha and Bravo, consisted of 3 12-man scout platoons, plus headquarters. The infantry company, Charlie, consisted of infantry scouts, similar to LRSD long-range surveillance detachment, and snipers. Bravo Troop received orders to inspect a cache approximately 10 kilometers north of their prior insertion point. Those orders changed to pursue a safe house in Turkey, sighted by a drone. Also spotted were 3 possibly armed men. Charlie cleared 30 taboos, but found it deserted. As night fell, the darkness brought movement. Shortly after sundown, a group of 27 insurgents amassed in the canals south of 30 Tammuz for an assault on Charlie Troop. The insurgents were quickly eliminated during the subsequent firefight. Following the night attack south of Tammuz, the infantry of Charlie Troop began to clear the extensive canal network while Alpha Troop searched for caches north of Tammuz. The region around Turkey was perfect for defense. The towns were ringed by fields irrigated by deep, ancient canals that channel movement to main roads. The canals were deep enough to store supply depots, weapon caches, bunkers, or hide enemy movement. Open fields provided sight lines around every town, perfect for enemy heavy weapons or mortars to find exposed troops. Thick reeds choked the canals, hiding enemies and caches. Every house had a walled brick courtyard. Simple mud huts hid basements and tunnels. The enemies were well armed, equipped, trained and tenacious. They would not go easily. The troops were so short-handed that many scout trucks were filled with three-man crews, meaning the driver would often act as a dismounted soldier, a cardinal sin in the cavalry world as it leaves the vehicles immobile. But paratroopers are drilled to be adaptable and to work with what they have. And that is exactly what 573 did in Iraq. Platoons generally consisted of 4 high-mobility multi-purpose wheeled vehicles, known as Humvees or trucks. In 2006, 573 was using refitted M1025 and a few M1151A1 as the older models were slowly replaced. Each truck carried a machine gun in the top cupola. Some carried the Mark 19 automatic grenade launcher. However, the squadron did not use many of these as it had been operating in urban environments. Searching canals and farm sheds yielded caches of weapons. Motorcycles were used by the insurgents for reconnaissance or hit-and-run attacks through the canals. Delta Company was a support unit attached to 573 before deployment. Delta provided the logistical support needed to keep the other troops in the fight. But Delta found themselves as much a part of the front line as the scouts and infantry. During the course of the deployment, Delta Company would share as many casualties as the combat troops. In 573, every hand was needed to fight, regardless of their role or specialty, just like the generations of paratroopers before them. 573 truly embodied one team, one fight. During the fighting at Turkey, Delta troopers found themselves turning cargo pallets into ad hoc bridges to cross canals and trenches, opening maneuver options for the combat commanders. The refuelers found themselves at the very front of the battle when Captain Few suggested burning the canals for terrain denial during the heart of the ambushes. Searching through the villages continued as more caches of weapons and explosives are uncovered. Evidence of ethnic cleansing against Shia Muslims was uncovered east of 30 Tammuz. A Shia mosque was investigated, destroyed by a car bomb. Midday on the 15th, Charlie Troop caught a team of IED emplacers digging holes for mines near 30 Tammuz. The rear of Charlie, Alpha Troop became bogged down after striking an IED. During the subsequent sweep of a farm nearby, insurgents lured a fire team from Charlie using a false surrender. Lieutenant John Dennison was hit in the attack. Nearly simultaneously, Alpha Troop ran into a section of insurgents who also feigned surrender. The firefight kept Alpha from reinforcing Charlie. The insurgents were trained in small team tactics and armed with armor-piercing steel core munitions. Their gunfire was more accurate than the average farmer-turned-guerrilla. The crew of the Alpha 1-5 truck dismounted to capture the surrendering insurgents. Waiting until the paratroopers drew closer, the insurgents suddenly took cover and opened fire when the troops were under 25 meters away. Staff Sergeant Keeley and Private First Class Venturer returned fire, using the truck as cover in the open field. But the insurgents' cover and suppression made them difficult targets. A freak accident broke the bolt on a 50 caliber machine gun after firing only a single round, rendering the M2 inoperable, leaving the paratroopers without their own suppression as a hail of bullets and grenades slammed close all around them. Gunner Specialist Randolph attempted to return fire with his M4, but became pinned by the automatic return fire. Red 4 to the rescue. Sergeant First Class Mitch Gonzalez led his fire team to flank the insurgents, silencing them with a well-placed grenade. Staff Sergeant Clint Keeley was medevaced with hearing damage and concussion from the nearby grenade blasts. Nearby, Charlie Troop moved to clear a farm. Two insurgents popped out of a building, surrendering. Lieutenant Dennison moved to detain them. Using the distraction, the second insurgent raised his weapon. First Lieutenant John Ryan Dennison died of his wounds shortly after medevac. Dennison became the first casualty of 573 Cavalry. House by house, door to door, canal to trench and field. The fighting escalated following the insurgent ambushes. False surrenders and the death of their own angered the paratroopers, driving them forward with intensity. The insurgents stashed RPGs, mortars, and heavy machine guns in caches across the canal system, in tunnels and spider holes. Much like a militia, the insurgent fighters of the council would flee their villages and meet outside of Turkey to recover the weapons and equip themselves. A network of IEDs and anti-tank mines bought time while the heavy weapons were uncovered. The Americans' rapid assault into the battle space left the insurgents little time to prepare. But the longer the battle dragged on, the better equipped the enemies became. As the day wore on, the squadron found itself in the middle of hostile territory, ringed by mines, cut off by canals, and taking casualties. Keeping the insurgents out of the canals proved nearly impossible. Alpha Troop turned the Delta Company refuelers into ad hoc terrain denial tools, flooding the canals with flame. Delta Company was a support unit attached to 573 before deployment. Delta provided the logistical support needed to keep the other troops in the fight. But Delta found themselves as much a part of the front line as the scouts and infantry. In deployment, Delta Company would share as many casualties as the combat troops. In 573, every hand was needed to fight, regardless of their role or specialty, just like the generations of paratroopers before them. 573 truly embodied one team, one fight. During the fighting at Turkey, Delta troopers found themselves turning cargo pallets into ad hoc bridges to cross canals and trenches, opening maneuver options for the combat commanders. The refuelers found themselves at the very front of the battle when Captain Few suggested burning the canals for terrain denial during the heart of the ambushes. Alpha Troop regrouped at Roman's house in Turkey. Bravo Troop moved to fill the space between Alpha and Charlie, but hit an unmarked hide in a field, severely injuring 9 paratroopers. That night, OPs were sent out into the fields to watch for movement. A 30-strong platoon of insurgents was observed emerging from hidden bunkers in the fields. Targeting these insurgents was difficult for fear of hitting the friendly troops in the OPs. Snipers from Charlie and scouts from Alpha came under fire as the OPs were recalled to the main force. Danger close air support from F-16s and a UAV's Hellfire missile destroyed the enemy platoon. In the darkness, Bravo Troop hit an IED, wounding many. Sergeant First Class Lilly was medevaced along with 8 others. Captain Dobbins was dazed from concussion. Leadership of Bravo Troop for the night fell to XO Captain Schiller and Sergeant First Class Clemens as insurgents moved toward them. Alpha Troop's blue platoon came under fire across a canal, pinning them down until a well-placed grenade silenced the enemies. Early ambushes slowed the paratroopers' advance and drew the assault force out as chaos spread in the canals. The paratroopers adapted quickly, forcing the insurgents into maneuver warfare, turning the canals against the enemy as channelized pockets where aircraft could bring danger-close air support. Danger close means an attack made from an aerial asset or artillery that is within 600 meters of friendly troops. These are risky ventures as any errors risk a blue-on-blue situation. When enemy bunkers were found, air support was called in by Spartans and forward observers to strafe the narrow green spaces between the berms. Canals hinder maneuver. A platoon of trucks could easily find itself cut off from each other on opposite sides. Fighting in the canals was intensely dangerous. They made perfect trenches for the defending insurgents, up to 15 to 30 deep and 30 feet wide, too deep for mounted heavy weapons to reach. Machine guns on the trucks were rendered useless as the barrels couldn't depress into the canals. Troopers resorted to rifle and grenade assaults over the edge, into the reeds. The trucks and troops sitting high on the berms were targets of grenade ambushes in return. Scout truck teams traveled down the berm roads, suppressing the canals with automatic gunfire and grenades. Follow-on infantry teams did the hard work of clearing from within the canals, following after the automatic barrage from the berm above. Recon by fire. An infantry battalion would have had the manpower to send squads through the canals for assaults. 573 often had to conduct clearing assaults in teams of 3 or 4 troopers. Scattered pockets of insurgents remained to be flushed out of hiding and eliminated. Within their canals and bunkers, they stood a chance to ambush the Americans' understrength clearing teams. However, the insurgents were no longer able to coordinate their attacks, nor able to move freely. While they still presented a deadly threat to root out of hiding, the paratroopers had won the initiative and were now on the hunt. Clearing the canals and chasing remnant forces took priority, but was deadly work. By midday, a squad of infantry led by Captain Rhett Schiller was ambushed while clearing down a canal. The team had walked right into a hidden machine gun position. Schiller was immediately wounded, along with several other troopers. His team fought heroically while pinned down with nowhere to run. Despite the medic's best attempts, Captain Rhett Schiller succumbed of his wounds. The loss of the officers is testament to the dangers of close combat, not as a detraction from the skills of the medical platoon. Under Major Rather, Doc Woodruff, and Ben Seban, the medical platoon attached to 573 was a source of excellence. Endlessly drilling their skills at Fort Bragg made the medics more than capable for the rigors of the real thing. From first aid and primary response to critical care, transport, and medevac, the platoon with the motto, "We bury our mistakes," kept many paratroopers from the grave. The Battle of Turkey raged for 96 hours. The cavalry had achieved tactical surprise on a tenacious enemy, but at a cost. 2 American officers lay dead, while at least 11 paratroopers were seriously wounded. Several Iraqi army partners were also killed. At least 74 insurgents were killed and dozens taken captive for questioning. Torture rooms, prisons, and propaganda found in the homes showed the true face of the enemy, a cult of extremists grabbing power in the vacuum of civil war. Searching the villages uncovered evidence of ethnic cleansing, torture chambers, assassinations, and a network of Wahhabist training camps. Turkey was at the heart of so much evil. For now, the council was bloodied. They needed to be destroyed. The cavalry's mission was finished for now. Bloodied but proven, they would return to Turkey to finish the battle just a few short months later. Running low on munitions and with no relief from follow-on forces available, Lieutenant Colonel Poppers carefully evaluated the situation. Most of the council leadership had fled while their zealous foot troops kept the cavalry engaged, and many of those zealots were now deceased thanks to his troops. Poppers decided that there was little else to be done in Turkey. Now that the battle was waning, Poppers could assess how his troops had performed. Given the rocky start of unexpectedly stiff resistance from well-trained and armed insurgents, the paratroopers under his command had adapted quickly, communicated well, and coordinated with supporting units such as the gunships and F-16s. While the deaths of the two young officers were beyond regrettable, the sharp thinking of his troop commanders, quick actions of his combat troopers, and highly drilled skills of the medics prevented the toll from being higher. Perhaps the most impressive aspect of the battle was the amount of captured intelligence, detainees and weapons. Turkey had been a key player in the insurgency in Diyala and beyond. But for now, the council was on the run, and the cavalry knew right where to find them. Find them and finish them they would.